Folks, I am very happy to welcome to the to the As the World Churns podcast for the very first time, Kaivan Shroff, who is a former DNC delegate for Kamala Harris and a Democratic strategist. And I discovered you, as folks may not know, because this pod, As the World Churns, is new, vis-a-vis TikTok, because of the fantastic videos that you put up, and on and when I was still on Twitter, which I
R.I.P.
know, which RIP, which I am no longer on, but I'm on Blue Sky. But let's talk about this. We are now 4 months into this administration, and it seems, according to the New York Times, that has a new piece that is up that is talking about the ways in which Donald Trump has forever potentially change the political landscape, that even though he had a loss in 2020, that he has consistently over the last 10 years been gaining voters. He's been picking off black voters, Latino voters, working class voters, while Democrats seemingly are only growing in one particular area, which is the highly educated, wealthy enclaves of America, which we know are shrinking. And so my question is, 4 months into this, what do you believe the message is that Democrats have, if any?
Well, I think that's exactly the problem, right? I mean, Democrats have gotten bogged down by the same stories and arguments and narratives since 2016. And I haven't seen a lot of new ideas, new energy, new voices. And when we do get the new voices, they sort of say the same old ideas. And I will say, I'm a fan of a lot of those ideas. I think building on progress and, investing in policies that, take 10 years, 20 years to truly deliver for the entire nation is of value and has a proven track record. But people aren't buying that. They're not buying what
Mhm.
we're selling. They're not feeling it in their day-to-day lives. And to your point, the system works for the people that are highly educated and wealthy in those enclaves that you're talking about. And the system isn't working for everyone else who, whether or not what Trump says makes sense, are willing to just choose the devil they don't know. And I
Mm.
think that's a big problem. And, there's been all this discussion, does the left need a Joe Rogan? They did that big effort with
Yep.
2024 DNC TikTok influencers, I
Yep.
know you know. And even I'm just seeing now, all these efforts to get young voices out there on college campuses on TikTok. And I don't think any of it's working, but we can dive into that in order.
Yeah, yeah, because before we dive in, I wanna bring your attention to, again, one of the old, and I mean old versus his age, as well as old thinkers inside of the Democratic Party that I would love for them to retire, which is James Carville, who James Carville, right? Exactly. Insert roll eyes.
He's
James,
retired. That's the
right.
thing. Like,
That's the
what is
thing.
he
And
doing?
and
He's
has
guest
it
talking everywhere.
and
I mean,
hasn't been on a campaign since the 90s. But when he was asked recently about, AOC and about Bernie, he's like, all I ever get asked about is AOC and Bernie. Like, what about Elise Slotnick and, and others? And I'm like, what about her? What about her performative stance on, killing wokeness? And we need an alpha mentality on the left. So when you see that mainstream corporate media is still diving in the 90s think tanks of the recesses of James Carville's mind, what do you make about that and their ability to move forward?
well, I think, first of all, it's a little bit of a commentary on the institutional media that that's their go-to, right? They've been calling the same voices to go on those shows and give the same opinions for decades, and their business model is dying. So it's not going to work for them. And it's also vice versa, right? Democrats like James Carville, are threatened by people like AOC, Bernie Sanders. I'm no Bernie Sanders fan, but he did introduce something new, which is what I'm saying
Mhm.
is that criticism. Now, I think, to have him out on the talk show circuit rehashing 2016 certainly isn't helpful at this time. And I wrote a piece for MSNBC a couple of months ago. Why is he running for reelection himself, right? Doesn't that sort of speak to and undermine his whole movement of we need new ideas, we need new leaders? Because the Bernie thing is over. The Bernie movement didn't become anything, frankly. It became DSA, right, to some extent, and that's withered. absolutely withered. AOC, I think, has created her own brand, and that was smart of her to sort of break away from that. And she is a good inside player and outside player. She does know how to get some wins for people in her community and across the country through the policy frameworks, and then she's also great at connecting online. But I think, again, this like there's almost this scientific method I think that's misapplied by Democrats where they see something that's worked somewhere and they try to replicate it, which isn't a bad idea, but the execution is very poor. And I think you can't be that scientific. There's an art to a lot of this about
Mhm.
connecting with people, about coming across authentic. You can't just say, oh, well, they have this type of influencer. Let's cosplay,
Right.
some like
Right.
Duck Dynasty bro, and we'll suddenly win the male vote. Like, that's not going to work. And I think, David Hogg obviously has come under fire for sort of some of his comments about young men just want to have sex and go party. And like, look, of course, that's appealing to some extent. Like, is he the right messenger? Is that what he's done with his life? Because he's a youth advocate. So hopefully he doesn't think young people just want to do those things. Hopefully he understands they actually do care about the policies that affect their everyday lives. That's what he's been talking about for a decade. So it's incongruous. And then, of course, to go on Bill Maher, which, my grandmother watches Bill Maher. I don't know anyone else that watches Bill Maher my age. To go pitch those ideas really sort of, I think, betrays what I'm seeing with a lot of these influencers and people that want to be sort of the ones catching the mantle. It's about them and it's about their media attention and their brand and their future. It's not actually about what young voters across the country think. Whereas when you have somebody like a Theo Vaughn, not to agree with what he says, of course, but who's talking about life and all these other topics and then weighing in on some political stuff, not positioning himself to run for Congress, it comes across very different.
I think that what we are talking about too, the greater theme is authenticity. And I think that what the left is missing right now in terms of their desire to just cosplay what is working on the right comes across as incredibly inauthentic, right? When you have Elise Slotnick talking about alpha males and this, that, and the other thing, she literally sounds like one of the MAGA Barbies, but just parroting Democratic talking points. And it falls flat. And I think that one of the reasons why an AOC can take flight in the way that she does is because she speaks from the heart. She tells the truth through the lens of her own experience, what she sees and what she hears in her community, and she continues to do that. So does Jasmine Crockett and others that are inside of the House
Mhm.
who still have not received the mantle from the establishment Democrats and still are told to sit down and wait their turn while literally people are dying in their seats, as evidenced by, sadly, the late Jerry Conley. But should he have been ranking member of oversight as opposed to, oh, I don't know, AOC who ran for the same position and he died there?
Well, in fairness, right? Who else does that authentic approach work for? Nancy Pelosi. So I think you can break it out of the age mold, and I think you can be iconic and at any age and come across like this person saying what's on their mind, what they think, and they're sort of uninhibited in that way. But most people of that generation don't come across that way. Most people of that generation in leadership in the Democratic Party haven't understood digital or social media, and they want to farm it out, and that doesn't
Mm,
work. And then what you end up with, and I know a lot of these influencers and they're very nice people and they're thoughtful to some extent, but really they're just regurgitating and parroting what some 80-year-old who doesn't know social media told them because they think that's their shot. Like, it's like an old American story. So it's not that interesting. And I think, I know maybe this is like a too online topic, but if you've been on TikTok, there's all this discourse about this quote unquote unfuck America tour, which had a
mhm.
lot of big influencers. There was some internal fighting, lack of organization. It imploded, and now they're all sort of fighting with each other. By the way, I don't think they mind that much because they're still able to monetize their videos, villain or
Mm.
hero of the story, talking about this thing, getting the views, getting into the drama. It's sort of like modern reality TV, but it doesn't serve the Democratic Party, and they certainly shouldn't be investing in it instead of trying to find and amplify those authentic voices.
So right now too, right? It was just, announced the Democrats are spending $20 million, $20 million, Kaivan, to invest in SAM, right? SAM is this acronym. of folks that is about investing in the American male. Um, Talk to us about that and how successful you think that that project is going to be.
I think all of these top-down projects are absurd, consultant-pushed wastes of money because, again, you don't have to work that hard to find what's not working. Like, I do think there's some insight into the criticism, not on I don't wanna adopt the narrative of wokeness and DEI or whatever. I would summarize it as Democrats have done themselves a disservice by overtone policing, bringing the way that you have discourse in a classroom to the national conversation, shutting down anyone that doesn't say things in the right words in the right way, like perfectly, and it stalls conversation and it alienates people. That doesn't mean that it's okay to be willfully ignorant and say a bunch of
Mhm.
obnoxious stuff. And of course, we should keep calling that out. But not everything you disagree with, you shut down immediately the first time
Mhm.
it's said. And that keeps happening. And I think that's also led us to a lot of the leaders that we do have because we don't have those discussions, including, by the way, David Hogg. And not to pick on David, but he wants the attention. He's sort of saying I should be the face and the leader of the new
Mhm.
Democratic
Mhm.
Party.
Mhm.
But then I look at somebody like my friend Malcolm Kenyatta, who,
Mhm.
maybe wasn't on TV every 5 seconds, but was doing the work in his state of Pennsylvania, knows all those folks there, has built those roots, has an idea, an agenda, a pitch that he wants to share with people. And that doesn't get booked on the Bill Maher show, but it resonates with real voters. So, how can Democrats amplify that? How can they focus on that and that messaging? And I think it's much more simple than that. I mean, we're not here to be your entertainment, your best friend, your favorite TV show. Like, it's about influencing your life in a positive way. And what bothered me so much about what David Hogg said about young men and sex is I think actually Democrats are already winning on that message if you look at and frame it correctly, which they don't do. But right, there's been one party for the past decades that's been fighting for your sexual freedom, sexual health access, so that
Mhm.
if you are a
Mhm.
young guy and you do want to have casual sex, you don't have to be a dad in 9 months because that's not a lot of fun to be a 20-year-old father. I don't think they're going out to the club. Whereas the other party wants to take us back to purity times. They want only, intercourse for procreation. All of those
Mhm.
ideas are not popular with straight young men who these people keep talking about appealing to. How simple is that? Like to say, I don't think it's incredibly complicated to say that. And we have example after example of the efforts Republicans are taking to do this, including banning contraceptives, all those things, right? So is it so deep? Like, I don't know that we have to really engineer and paid $5 million to figure that out.
Yeah, not 5, 20.
Yeah.
$20 to figure it
I
out,
was letting them
not
save a
5.
little money for
Right,
some
you were
other
gonna
great
you
ideas.
right, exact for some other big ideas, that they're using. When you think about again, because I wanna go back to the Joe Rogan of the left, right? And the way in which and this is not again, the way that the right has been able to infiltrate into different markets, whether it's UFC, whether it is the brolosphere and and the
Mhm.
grievance of white straight men, whether it's gaming, right? And they've been able to infiltrate into gaming. All of those things did not happen overnight. They've actually been longer 20-year plus projects, right? Of having these conversations and kind of feeding some of these ideas to these influencers, but allowing them to go off and do what they will, right? And again, that's where the authenticity comes in. Do you think that there is a way to use quote unquote influencers in a way that is more authentic? If you could do it, if you were the person that was like, let me manage this for the Democratic Party, what could some of the things look like?
Yeah, well, I think that it has been done well in some cases. And who comes to mind? I don't know if you know my friend Kenny, Too Raw, Too Real is his username on TikTok
Mm-hmm.
and Twitter. He goes viral all the time, and he's definitely been super engaged with Kamala Harris, and he was during the campaign. And I look at that as a very different model than the other influencers that we think about, sort of those young, like high school looking, bro squad type kids, where he is so original and he does his raps and he obviously has an amazing backstory, really tough background and lived experience. So he understands the policies. He goes and studies the facts and details. He can, debate on and on about that. He's not regurgitating a talking point somebody gave him. He's coming up with creative, clever talking points that resonate and speak to his real life, and people like that, and it goes viral. So too does it go viral when, like, some debate bros like, "Oh, here's a really tired point that I'm making, and I'm saying it with a lot of energy and my mic in my face," but it doesn't win over anybody because it's not exciting, it's not interesting, it's not new. It's like, great, this is what some 50-year-old woman sitting at home on TikTok wishes young people were thinking. Like,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that's it. Like, same thing with all those influencers at the DNC, right? Like, who did they reach? Because if they were already pro-democratic influencers brought to the DNC, the people following them agree with everything they're saying. Like, so it's not that
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Whereas I do think, by the way, I do think it was a good idea for Kamala Harris to go and call her daddy. Those are the types of moves that people should make. And Democrats are so afraid of all of those things. And like, even that, there was so much consternation and discussion and debate. She should have done a million of those. But I think on the other hand, when you think about policies too, it's not just about the comms approach, right? Like, tariffs is such a good example of this because I think every economist worth their weight knows what Trump is doing with tariffs does not make economic sense. It is not good for America. It is bad for everyday
Right.
American. All of those things are in Democrats' favor. So why is the issue not so clear cut? Because it's a new idea. It's a new fight. It's a new battle. It brings a lot of energy, and people that are so desperate are willing to try anything. I mean, they're not going to analyze the impact of tariffs. They're just going to read headlines. Oh, Trump got a win today. Oh, Trump got a loss today. Oh, Trump backed off. Oh, he's doing it again. They don't really care. They're just like, let's shake the snow globe and see if something happens. Like, and that's terrible. But if we're so smart, right? If Democrats are so educated and they're so wonky and all these things, what are some of the more exciting, good new ideas? And AOC did bring some of that, whether I agree with
Yeah.
all of them or not.
Mhm.
But what are the new conversations we're having? How are we going to get headlines for ourselves that are not Joe Biden's age, Joe Biden's health, defending Joe Biden, attacking Trump? Because as much as I want to sit there all day and criticize what's happening, that nobody cares. Like, they really don't care. Like,
And
we're not nobody cares. The people we need to care
care,
do not
don't
care about
care.
those ideas.
And I think that that's right. I think that there are 2 things, not 2, there are several things that Democrats do that need to be shifted. And one of them is either A, sitting back and saying that, "Oh, Donald Trump will just, hang himself with the tariffs and with things and not engage at all and just hope and pray like political ostriches that eventually when they take their heads out of the sand that things will be okay and the people will say, "Well, I guess you're better than the alternative." Because that's not a winning strategy. And then number 2 is cosplaying what the right is doing and hoping that somehow that will go viral and spread on your side, and that's not working. My last question for you then is when people are finding themselves, and myself being included, to be disillusioned by the Democratic Party and seeing this country that they love ripped apart, right? Like the roots being pulled out and everything, all of our institutions crumbling around us. And this is what it is like to exist inside of a crumbling empire. Do you think that now is the time for the imagining of a really robust third party? That while these two parties are showing themselves to be absolutely inept in two different ways, is it time for a real third party?
Look, I think, one of the things I've been thinking about is like, should Democrats just rebrand? And I think it would come across like Facebook becoming Meta. I mean, is anyone sold on that? Not really. And I think the problem is, no, what we don't see, I don't see a viable third party coming. And by the way, of course, where are all those people that stop the Democrats from winning cycle after cycle? And they have all these different views. They should like go try it, right? Like now I don't think it's going to be successful. I don't think it's a great idea. But why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they trying to lead? Why aren't they doing any of those things? Because I think what we really need to do is get out of this sort of you have to be in line with the entire Democratic Party platform to be a good person and a good Democrat. And that really has been the conversation as much. And, I've probably been part of that conversation. And, we're
Mhm.
not all always perfect at that because sometimes things do strike the wrong way. But what I think those sort of right adjacent podcasters in that media framework have done is they've allowed people to hang on one policy issue that they like, one idea that they like, lean into a couple things that they think make sense. And it's not they have to check all the boxes. Of course, then just like the Democratic Party In leadership, you have to either get in line or not, and they certainly fall in line and they treat Trump like a king. So I'm not saying that's not the case, but they do allow some other voices and ideas with a mixed policy set to be there. And I think Democrats need to understand how to do that better. And I think part of the conversation is people are too afraid to speak up and disagree. They don't want to get canceled, quote unquote. And of course, that's been like a totally distorted conversation. But there's a little bit of energy in that, I think, that is not inaccurate. And then on the other piece, I think Democrats, the leadership is so much less structured and organized and top down, as much as people feel that it is, than Republicans, where everything is being said and done by Trump and his team. And like, it's like, we're going to threaten you if you don't do it. Discipline, message discipline. Like, one
Yeah.
example, just to end with the plane story, right? Like, Trump's taking this $400 million jet. It's so obviously corrupt. It's so obviously pay to play. But like, it's example 5,000 of that. And these voters already know that about Trump. So whether they read the headline or not, it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to be the last straw. They don't know how it's going to affect their daily lives. Like, it surely will in time that he's, chopping up and selling our government to foreign enemies. Like, duh. But why can't Democrats just get up there every time they're asked about that plane issue? Say, you know what? But while we're talking about planes, did you notice that under the Trump administration, air travel has been worse than in previous decades? It's like we're devolving. You can't get to your destination.
Yep.
Flights are being
Yeah.
canceled. Flights are not safe. Those are issues that affect people every single day that they do feel, that they do talk about at the office, that does affect their families and their holidays and their vacations, right? So make it real every time. Take that bigger issue that some people care about that's worth talking about. I'm not saying it's not worth
And
talking
drill
about it,
down.
but make it every day and do that with every single thing.
Yeah. We will have to leave it there today. Kaivan Shroff, I thank you so much for joining as the
Of
world
course.
churns.
Yes.
This
A
is
pleasure.
fantastic, and we hope to have you back very soon. Appreciate
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.